Take a look at this picture. What was the first thing that caught your eye? Of course, it's the missing front tooth. But if we look a little more closely, we'll see that the father in the family is missing not only a tooth, but also an eyebrow. If you notice that too, give this a like. All of this shows that a smile is a very important part of a person's appearance. The first thing we notice when talking to anyone is their teeth. That's why people who are missing a front tooth are often very self-conscious about their smile and try to hide their flaw. In this video, I'll tell you how to restore that tooth in the most natural way possible so it doesn't stand out from the rest. How can you do this quickly so you don't have to go without a tooth for a long time? And is it possible to restore a missing tooth in just one appointment? Let's go over 4 options for restoring a single tooth that you should pay attention to. The first option allows you to restore a tooth in just one visit. Another method restores the tooth fundamentally and for a long time, but there are some nuances with that one. With the third method, if you don't know enough, you could end up damaging other healthy teeth. Watch until the end and you'll understand this topic as well as any doctor. The first method of restoration is the adhesive bridge or adhesive bridge prosthesis. For short, it's called ABP. The essence of this technique is that you can restore a tooth directly in a single visit to the dentist's chair. It takes exactly 2 hours. The structure is installed or fabricated in such a way that small recesses are made in the neighboring teeth. A fiberglass beam is placed, just like a crossbar appears between the 2 teeth in the gap. And on this crossbar, the doctor, just like a sculptor, begins to build up the tooth millimeter by millimeter using regular filling material. And after 2 hours, the patient has a fully functional artificial tooth in their mouth, completely indistinguishable from the other teeth. The advantage of this design is that we fill the defect and our neighboring teeth do not shift or cause deformation of the jaw or teeth. The downside is that this structure is still considered temporary. And of course, if we wear it for a long time, the bone under our artificial tooth will gradually recede because, so to speak, it is not working, not functioning. And in the future, if you suddenly decide to get an implant there, it's possible that there won't be enough bone. Also, of course, the gum may gradually recede as well because, again, it is not functioning. Overall, the construction is reliable and functional. It doesn't cause any discomfort and is securely fixed. And as I'll say again, to repeat, it is absolutely indistinguishable from the neighboring teeth. The cost of such a construction ranges from 15 to 45,000 rubles. And
you mentioned that something will be ground down in the tooth. Is it going to be a significant amount of grinding? Is this something to pay attention to?
Not in the tooth itself, but in the 2 neighboring teeth. Because this bar needs to be placed somehow. It's like a crossbar or a pull-up bar, you could say. There will be a small indentation. No, it's not critical. We call this the dentin enamel junction, so it won't have any significant effect on the neighboring teeth. The second option is not as quick to make and usually takes 3 to 5 days, but it is the cheapest. This is an immediate denture or a butterfly denture. It's a real removable tooth. In other words, a single removable tooth. It is made from the same material as removable dentures, plastic, acrylic. The patient puts this denture on and takes it off, meaning they can even remove it at night. Functionally, if we talk about the advantages, of course, once again, we are promptly correcting the cosmetic defect. With good craftsmanship, it can be quite difficult to distinguish this construction from a real tooth. That can definitely be considered an advantage. The price is also an advantage of this construction. And the most important advantage is that the neighboring teeth do not shift, and in this way we preserve our bite. But it should be noted that this type of construction is most often temporary. When a patient is preparing for implantation, saving up money, or planning to get an implant, for example, during a vacation, so that they don't have to go without a tooth, this construction is made. That's why it is purely temporary. Although in our practice at our clinic, there are patients who have worn this type of construction for decades. Of course, we can see that the gum recedes under this construction. Such a tooth even appears visually shorter because the gum recedes, the bone diminishes, and patients themselves notice this. So if initially, when it was placed, everything looked even, then after some time, of course, the tooth becomes noticeable and appears shorter. The disadvantages of this construction are that this tooth, of course, is not as stable, it has a certain mobility, and it is quite difficult to chew with it. So it is purely for covering up such an aesthetic defect. You put it on, go out into the world, as they say, show it off, and that's it. It is very difficult to chew with such a prosthesis. Sometimes it's even difficult to sneeze with such a prosthesis because it can simply fly out. So, of course, one of the main drawbacks is the fixation. Another disadvantage is that if you wear such a prosthesis for a long time, there will be bone loss under it. The production time for such a construction is a maximum of 3 to 5 days. The cost ranges from 15 to 20,000 rubles. The third method of restoration is the most traditional and still the most common. This is crowns. In other words, when we make bridges out of crowns. That is, we grind down two neighboring teeth, place these caps, crowns, on them, and between them we have a bridge in the form of the missing tooth. This construction is reliable and time-tested. I would even say tested over decades. Its advantages are reliability and secure fixation. It is absolutely indistinguishable from real teeth in terms of natural appearance, and most importantly, functionality. With such teeth, you can chew comfortably and not worry about anything. But as for the disadvantages, of course, nowadays, both patients and doctors have started to pay much closer attention to this. Patients most of all. Of course, we have to grind down two completely healthy neighboring teeth. And what does it mean to grind them down? Not only do we have to grind them down, but very often we also have to perform root canal treatment. In other words, we have to devitalize them, treat their canals, so that, God forbid, the teeth under the crowns don't start bothering you later. That is why this is one of the major drawbacks. In order to restore one tooth, we end up sacrificing two neighboring ones. So, of course, this is a disadvantage of this particular construction. But I want to emphasize again that there are a lot of such cases. People do this, and among the advantages, by the way, is the price, because if you compare it, for example, with implantation, of course, that's much more expensive. But as a type of prosthetics, as a way to restore a single missing tooth, it is definitely an option that can and should be considered. Restoring a tooth with crowns takes from 7 to 14 days. The total cost for this procedure typically ranges anywhere from 70,000 up to 90,000 Russian rubles. The fourth method for restoring a single missing front tooth is dental implantation. At the present moment, this is widely considered the most modern, technologically advanced, and reliable way to restore your lost tooth and your smile. The essence of this method is that we place an implant. An implant is an artificial root. Next, an abutment is placed on the implant. This is the connector between the future crown and the implant. So, implant, abutment, crown. And such a tooth not only looks exactly like a natural tooth, like a real tooth, but it is also functional, and in its structure and composition, it is just like a real one. That is, it has both a root and a crown. And of course, such a tooth will last a very long time. We preserve the bone. So if we talk about the advantages, they include reliability and functionality. You can confidently chew with such a tooth and not worry about anything. Durability. And of course, preservation of our bone. That means we don't experience bone loss. In fact, we directly load the bone and you can easily chew with this tooth. As for the disadvantages, the price is probably one of them, let's say conditionally, but still, patients very often make decisions based on cost. Therefore, the price, of course, may not always be affordable for everyone, or rather may not be accessible, and of course, the time frames. So in terms of timing, such a tooth is restored in about 3 to 6 months. That means you might be without a tooth, or there will be some kind of temporary construction. But to get a fully functional tooth, it will take 3 to 6 months.
You said that to place an implant, you need to allow 3 to 6 months. But during this time, a person won't have to go without a tooth, right? How does a person usually go about during this time? Do you provide some kind of temporary replacement option, or are there other solutions?
Here, of course, everything is very individual. The first option is to make a so-called butterfly prosthesis. That's the first option. The second option, if the implant is placed with a certain what we call torque or force, that is, if this is measured with a special device during the implant placement, and if we achieve the required torque, then we can place a temporary crown literally the next day after the implant is installed. So this is possible. Therefore, if we do not achieve the necessary torque, then only the implant will be placed, and as you correctly said, there will be no tooth. That's why we offer the patient different options. Some people say, no, I'm fine walking around without a tooth. For those for whom aesthetics are important, of course, we will look for some options and offer a solution so that the patient can replace the defect and doesn't have to go without a tooth for a long time while the implant is integrating and the crown is being made. So everything is strictly individual. The time frame for tooth restoration with implantation, as I already mentioned, is from 3 to 6 months. The cost of restoring a tooth with implantation ranges from 70 to 120,000 rubles. It's important to understand that this cost is divided over 3 visits. That is, first you have the implant placed and you pay for the implant placement and the implant itself. Then you pay for the placement of the healing abutment, which happens 3 to 6 months later, and only after that do you pay for the fabrication and placement of the crown. I have told you about all 4 methods, and each method is good in its own way, and each method has its own nuances. But it's important to understand that no matter which method you choose, thanks to modern technology, no one will ever be able to tell that your tooth isn't real. The main thing is that you restore the missing tooth in a timely manner. That's the key point. But if I were to share my opinion, I would still base my decision on the specific task and, let's say, the initial conditions. If you still have financial concerns and are worried that changes might start occurring in the neighboring teeth or your bite might begin to shift, then I would make myself a simple butterfly prosthesis. If you have the means a bit more, but you don't want to get crowns or have your teeth ground down, yet at the same time you don't want to get an implant, I would choose an adhesive bridge because it really is very reliable. But if you do have the finances, and let's say you want a truly reliable solution, then of course I would choose implants. So personally, I would consider these 3 options. Share in the comments which method would you choose. If you still have questions about implants, write to me in the messengers. Links are in the description. I hope I was helpful and that you will choose the option that suits you best. Take care of yourself and stay healthy.